guys, and welcome to this video. I hope you're all doing super well. Thank you so much once again for joining me right here on my channel. So today guys, in this video, as you would have seen from the title, we are going to discuss the Jewish cult Lehava. Okay, the reason why I decided to discuss this particular cult is I did a video, you guys might recall, a couple of months ago on my channel called Judaism and Cults, and in that video I did a very brief overview, maybe 5 to 6 minutes, of different Jewish cults. And what I realized after doing that video is there's lots of information on YouTube, on social media, on TV about different cults, but when it comes to Jewish cults, there's a lot less information and a lot less people talking about Jewish cults. And maybe it's because Jewish cults are a lot more insular, and the people that tend to know the most about Jewish cults seem to be Jews in actual fact. Now, with this particular Jewish cult, Lehava, I got a lot of feedback about this particular cult on my last video, and this is why I decided to really cover this one and delve and do a lot more in-depth research, basically. So without further ado guys, let's get into the video. To understand guys who Lehava actually are at the core, we have to go way back to the early 90s, I want to say. And the founder of Lehava is called Ben-Gvir. Now Ben-Gvir was an adherent to a kind of Zionist kind of political sort of a party, I want to say, in Israel called Kach. Kach is spelled K-A-C-H. The founder of that particular party is called Kahen, which is why they're called Kach, I believe. And the founder of that party was actually promoting the expulsion of Arabs in Israel, and this is in the very early 90s, I want to say between 1990 and 1994. The founder of Kach, so Kahen, he was murdered in around 1994, and obviously there's kind of suspicious circumstances surrounding that, given what he was actually promoting. Ben-Gvir then went on to found his own organisation called Hemla, and it was supposed to be to promote what's called Saving the Daughters of Israel. Now, what this was is basically a movement to essentially stop Israeli women from being with Arab men. That was the whole purpose of this movement. What's really interesting is, from my perspective, I've always understood, guys, that a lot of the Israeli government, including Benjamin Netanyahu, have always been anti-Muslim, anti-Palestine, etc. But what I discovered with Benzi Gantz is he was actually anti-Christian as well. So their whole movement is not just that they don't want Israeli Jewish women to be specifically, Israeli women to Jewish women to be specifically with Arab men. They also don't want Christians in Israel. They were promoting burning down churches around the year of 2015. It's even more shocking, guys, when we discover that between the years of 2005 and 2013, the Israeli government was donating, in brackets, $175,000 annually to Hemla to support this separation of Jews and Arabs dating, basically, which is obviously absolutely ridiculous. Some people who are not Jewish watching this, for example, or don't know a lot about Judaism, might think in their mind, okay, why were they trying to separate Jewish women from Arab men, as in, okay, the Israeli government does not like Arabs or Muslims, but why would they not try to separate Jewish men from Arab women, right? And the reason being is, and other Jews will understand this as well, is because in Judaism, the bloodline is passed from the mother to the child, not the father to the child. So if a Jewish woman, she has a relationship with an Arab man, for them that's like breaking that bloodline. It's such a severe thing. It's worse than a Jewish man being with an Arab woman almost. It's so severe in regards to what they believe, which actually in the Torah is halakha law, that Jews should only really be dating and marrying other Jews. But when we think of today's situation and modernization, etc., of course it's ridiculous that people shouldn't intermix, but that's their perspective, and that's why they wanted to do this prevention of Jewish women dating Arab Muslim men. I mentioned it many times on my channel, guys, but for the past 30 years or more in Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu has been in power, and lots of things have happened in that time that are not positive for Israel. And when you understand that between 2005 and 2013, the Israeli government were giving this group Hemla that Ben-Gvir was overseeing, which is a racist Zionist activist group against Muslim men, and that Benjamin Netanyahu was leading the government at that time. I mean, when you look at today's events, for example, it kind of explains how we got to the point we got to, when you've got an Israeli prime minister donating money which is to promote the expulsion of Muslims in Israel, basically. The organisation, guys, that Ben-Gvir was leading, Hemla, was not solely against Arab men or Arabs or Muslims. It was actually against Christians as well. And this is something, again, that I didn't understand for a long time, more so in regards to the Israeli government and Benjamin Netanyahu, because everyone understands that Benjamin Netanyahu is racist against Muslims. I mean, it's beyond racist if we're quite frank, given what's going on in Gaza, which we're all, I presume, very much aware of. But one thing I couldn't understand before, guys, is why the Israeli army, why the IDF want to exterminate Christians in Gaza, and why are they, you know, destroying churches in Gaza. It made no sense to a lot of people, I think, as well. But Hemla, this organisation that Ben-Gvir founded to save the daughters of Israel, as they're called, and was supported by Benjamin Netanyahu with funding, was basically also promoting the extermination of churches in Israel. He was promoting actually burning churches and wanted to expulse Christians from Israel as well, which is extremely shocking. And this situation, guys, that was going on, it's very recent. This was all happening in 2015. Can you imagine? It's like absolutely disgusting. Previously, guys, on my channel, I mentioned that there are different denominations in regards to Judaism. There's Orthodox Judaism, Conservative Judaism, and Reform Judaism, and they are just, I want to say, different ways and levels in regards to practicing Judaism. I tend to find myself, to give you an idea, I've mentioned it before I think on my channel, sort of between Reform and Conservative Judaism, which is really modernized actually and forward thinking. Now, several years ago, actually, the sort of headquarters, you know, head office of Reform and Progressive Judaism together filed actually a complaint against Ben-Gvir because what he was doing was so extreme that they decided to actually protest against it, which is a very big thing because, I mean, the Federation, the Association for Reform and Progressive Judaism, guys, represents all Jews who are conservative and progressive and reform, basically, in the world. So for that organisation to come out and file a complaint against him was actually so serious, given that it's, you know, they're a huge Jewish religious organisation essentially. Now, there are some other founders to Lehava, guys. Ben-Gvir is not the sole founder of Lehava. There are, I think, 3 others. 2 of them I won't discuss in this video. I'm going to discuss one more before I get more into Lehava and what they actually do. And that man, the next person I'm going to discuss, has actually been very prominent, and I want to say almost instrumental actually, in what's currently going on in Gaza right now. And when I get into this next bit, guys, I think you will start to understand a lot more about why the situation in Gaza is at the extreme level it's at once I've discussed this particular person. And you might also recognize him or have heard of him. You might not have heard of his name, again, unless you are Jewish. But once I start going into detail, and if you look him up, you'll think, okay, he's linked to this, and it will start to make a lot more sense as in, it doesn't make sense what's going on in Gaza, it's ridiculous, but you will start to understand, okay, how did it get to this point with Gaza and what is behind this? And this particular man is part of the reason that Gaza is in the situation it's in right now. So it's quite serious, actually. And that man is Itamar Ben-Gvir. Now, who is Itamar Ben-Gvir? We have to go back a bit, guys, again here. Itamar Ben-Gvir is an Israeli lawyer. Now, for people who are Jewish, we have this saying that parents always want their children to be doctors, lawyers, or dentists. It's like a common kind of, almost like a semi-sarcastic running joke, basically, in Jewish community. Like, parents always want their children to have a good job. They want us to progress professionally to the maximum level. We're supposed to be very driven. And essentially, Itamar Ben-Gvir became an Israeli lawyer, a very, very high profile, prominent one. His parents are of Kurdish Iraqi descent. So essentially, he is what's called a Mizrahi Jew. So to clarify that again, guys, if you've been on my channel a while, you might understand there are also different tribes in Judaism, which are Ashkenazi, Sephardic and Mizrahi. And Mizrahi Jews are Jews that come from the Middle Eastern diaspora. So that could be Iran, Iraq, maybe Turkey, places like that, for example. So essentially, Itamar Ben-Gvir's parents, I believe they came from Iraq and they were Kurdish. So he's a Mizrahi Jew in regards to his lineage, basically, as a Jew. I would like to clarify, guys, before I go into any more details, so you guys can really feel and get the context of who this man is that this man is actually an Israeli settler in the West Bank. And when I say settler, guys, I use that word very specifically. If you guys have seen settler movements in the West Bank on the news lately, those are the people taking Palestinian families' homes from them and throwing them out of those homes and taking over their properties. And this is who Itamar Ben-Gvir is. He has taken land or property that belongs to Palestinian people and taken it over and settled there. Okay, just to give you an initial context of who this man is, and still this is not the worst of what we're seeing. This is 10% of who Itamar Ben-Gvir is, right? So he is an Israeli settler who lives in the West Bank of Gaza. Itamar Ben-Gvir, guys, was also part of, he had an interest as well in the political party Catch, which is the one, obviously, that Betsy Gottstein was actively involved in, I want to say. And Itamar Ben-Gvir was also involved in a political party called Otzma Yehudit, which is, again, another sort of anti-Arab Zionist movement political party, essentially. Now, he wasn't always a very malicious, nasty person, because you guys are thinking, till now, this guy doesn't sound good at all. But he wasn't always like this. It was when he reached his teenage years that he started gaining interest in what's, the Zionist movement and the expulsion and extermination of Palestinians and Arabs in Israel. And of course, guys, when you're a teenager, teenagers can be very influenceable. And some people would debate this, saying that, okay, but not all teenagers will make the same mistakes. Not all teenagers will go to such an extreme level. You get some teenagers who do naughty things and some that join extremist movements. And this is the case of Itamar Ben-Gvir. He ended up getting involved in Catch, getting involved in Otzma Yehudit and all these extremist Zionist movements. And really, this is the time when his parents should have been monitoring his behaviour, because he was a teenager and they basically didn't give a shit. They weren't monitoring his behaviour, which is, why this man progressively has got worse and worse. Now, this is someone, guys, who, when you would enter his living room, he actually had a portrait of a murderer in his living room. And I don't know many people or political people where you would enter their living room and they actually have a huge portrait of a murderer on their wall. Like, you will sit down to dinner with them or for a nice cup of tea, you walk into their living room and there's a picture of a murderer on the wall. Can you actually imagine this? In 2021, Itamar Ben-Gvir was involved in an incident. I think there was, some activist rally situation going on with Palestinians. And Itamar Ben-Gvir was there for some reason, and he started telling Israeli police to shoot Palestinians, which, you know, I mean, this is Itamar Ben-Gvir we're talking about, yeah? Anyway, progressively, this man managed to climb the ranks politically, and in 2022, he became the Ministry of Defense in Israel. Now, I don't know if you guys can kind of assimilate what this actually means and start to understand why the Gaza is in such a dire situation because of the Israeli government, because you have someone like this who's the Ministry of Defense in Israel. Can you imagine, guys, in the UK, if we had people like Boris Johnson and David Cameron and Rishi Sunak, and they had pictures of murderers in their living room, and they're then offered a job to be part of the UK government and part of Parliament and lead the country. This is actual insanity, right? But this is what happened to Itamar Ben-Gvir. He had a portrait of a murderer in his living room. Next thing you know, he's offered the job as you know, Ministry of Defense, you know, person for the Israeli government, which is very, very high ranking, as you can imagine, especially when it comes to Israel and Gaza and Palestine and the wars going on. This is someone who is very, very instrumental, obviously, in this process. Now, one thing he did, because although a lot of the Israeli government are Zionist and hate Arabs and Muslims, for some reason, Itamar Ben-Gvir didn't feel comfortable enough to leave the picture of the murderer Zionist person up in his living room. And that was, I think, that was the guy, who was one of the leaders in this Catch, you know, Zionist movement. I think it was a portrait of him. So he took the actual portrait down when he was offered the job as Ministry of Defence leader in 2022, because it wasn't a good image for him to have a picture of a murderer in his living room, as he was now the Ministry of Defence official for the Israeli government. Sorry guys, I need to backtrack a little bit because I missed an event in 2021. So basically what happened in 2021 is Itamar Ben-Gvir's father passed away, and because his dad, you know, was very elderly, probably he had some health issues, you know, as people get to a very elderly age, sometimes they have some health conditions, etc. His dad had a carer, which is, you know, very common, isn't it, in today's age. Often, you know, an elderly person will have a living carer and the children will be living out the house and have their own life. So that was the case with Itamar Ben-Gvir's father. He had a carer that was living in, doing all the daily duties, giving him his medication, etc, etc. Now what happened is it got to the point where Itamar Ben-Gvir's father passed away, and that carer had been there for time, guys. It sounded like he'd been there for years and years and years. So he was, you know, a very loyal person. And you can imagine, if you work with someone for years and you're with them 24/7 and you're taking care of them, and if you're very, very good at your job as a carer, you will become close to that person, and it also is almost a loss to yourself. Even though it's your job that you're doing, it's almost a loss to yourself. And also that was like a permanent income that person had had for years and years and years. So what happened is that particular employee, he was Sri Lankan, and when the father passed away, he was, you know, going to leave, I think, and go back to his country because, you know, he was there for years just to do that. So he asked Itamar Ben-Gvir for a severance pay. And, you know, Itamar Ben-Gvir could have just been like, no, or I don't think that's appropriate right now, or whatever. But that's not what Itamar Ben-Gvir did. Itamar Ben-Gvir opened a lawsuit against this poor carer man who's from Sri Lanka and took him to court because this man asked for a severance pay. Like, it's actually insane. And in my opinion, he did that to the man, one, because he's a malicious, nasty person, and two, because the carer was Sri Lankan and I presume not Jewish, which Itamar Ben-Gvir doesn't like, because he doesn't like anyone who's not Jewish. But this just shows you guys to what level someone can be this nasty and this malicious. In 2023 in Israel, there was a situation where 5 Haredi Orthodox, these are Haredi are like actually ultra Orthodox Jews, guys, okay, with all the traditional dress. 5 ultra-Orthodox Haredi Jews spat at Palestinians. Now, there is nothing in the Torah, I want to make this very, very clear, that tells us as Jews that we should be spitting on anyone or anything, okay? And I also want to make it clear, guys, but most of you will have understood this because you're intelligent people, that the behaviour of these Jewish people that I'm discussing in this video is not the behaviour that is expected of Jews in Judaism, and this is not what's written in the Torah, what these people are doing, which I'm sure you people will have already understand that if you're watching this video. But anyway, these 5 ultra-Orthodox Haredi Jews spat at Muslims in the street, spat at Palestinians in the street, right? Which is absolutely vile. You know, guys, for me personally, I just want to say, this is just my opinion, when you spit on someone, this is one of the lowest levels that you can go to in life. It's worse than even swearing at someone or whatever when you spit on someone, in my opinion. Or like, it's like animals have more decency than that, yeah? So they spat on Palestinians, bearing in mind they're ultra-Orthodox, so they should have been doing their prayers or, you know, doing religious things instead of spitting on people. But anyway, and what actually happened is the Palestinians wanted to raise a criminal case because this is quite serious, guys, you know. And Itamar Ben-Gvir, because I mentioned, remember guys, that he's actually an Israeli high-profile lawyer, kind of throughout the case, he was like, there's no criminal case for this. And it's just unbelievable. Like, this just is the demonstration of the fact that Palestinian Muslims and even Christians, let's be honest, in Israel have no human rights under Israeli law, whereas in any other country, if you did that to someone, that would actually be like an assault case. It's actually very, very serious. But this is who this man is, this Itamar Ben-Gvir, like, is actually absolutely disgusting. You guys may remember that earlier on in this video, I told you I was going to mention to you guys that you guys might start to recognise who Itamar Ben-Gvir is, or you might have come across him in the news recently, etc., apart from his links to Gaza and the fact he's Ministry of Defence. And the reason I actually said that is because I think it was towards the end of last year, and it started to come out in the press, although to be honest, Itamar Ben-Gvir has been persecuting Palestinians, pulled guns out on them and all sorts of nonsense for years actually. But there was an incident where he did pull out a gun on Palestinians last year. I think it was towards November or December last year, as far as I can recall, towards the end of last year. And at that point, it became sort of international news, although this has been the case for months and years, I want to say, that Itamar Ben-Gvir is one of the top dogs at Zara, okay? And guys, I have never been a fan of Zara because they always have processes going on behind the scenes that I don't like. For example, it was, I think, just before COVID that they were exploiting Uyghur Muslims in China, and they were making these people work, God knows, 20 hours a day making clothes for them in China, and these factories where they would abuse the people, tell them they can't have their own religion, that they're not allowed to speak their own language, etc. It's absolutely vile. Turns out at the end of 2023 that Itamar Ben-Gvir is one of the top dogs at Zara, and that actually came out when this incident came out, that he held a gun to Palestinians, and someone discovered, okay, he is one of the top dogs at Zara. And it sends chills down my spine, guys. It is just absolutely disgusting. This is why a lot of people started boycotting Zara at that point, because it was discovered that he was, you know, one of the top people at Zara, essentially. So that's for Itamar Ben-Gvir. Now, we are going to get back into Lehava and, you know, but guys, I wanted to explain who Bentzi Gottstein is and Itamar Ben-Gvir, because these are the top people at Lehava. These are the people essentially running the operation of Lehava, you know, they're the... I mean, Bentzi Gottstein is the founder, and Itamar Ben-Gvir, again, is a top dog at Lehava. So, obviously, I mentioned earlier that the Israeli government was giving $175,000 to another kind of activist group that Itamar Ben-Gvir was running before, and this is before he became Ministry of Defense in Israel. And obviously that means that Benjamin Netanyahu, who was the Israeli Prime Minister at the time, was the one authorizing to release all these funds to Itamar Ben-Gvir even before he became Ministry of Defense for his racist organization Hemla. Okay, so anyway, Bentzi Gottstein and Itamar Ben-Gvir got together with 2 other people. So there are 4 top people at Lehava overseeing this cult. Bentzi Gottstein, Itamar Ben-Gvir, and 2 other guys. These 2 other guys are kind of like, I can't say they're minor, but you don't really hear about them. They're there doing their shit, but it's really Bentzi Gottstein and Itamar Ben-Gvir that are, you know, involved in this whole situation, etc. And by the way, Itamar Ben-Gvir, guys, is still involved in what's called in Israel Knesset, and Knesset is like the Israeli parliament, and he is still actively now, because he's Ministry of Defense, I don't know what the word is in English actually, guys, I can only think of it in French. He is advising Benjamin Netanyahu on his moves still and what the Israeli army and IDF should be doing in Gaza as we speak right now. Okay, one thing that's just occurred to me, guys, and I've never come across this, I think, ever with any other cult that exists, you guys can tell me if I'm wrong because it might have existed but I don't know, is that I've never seen someone who's actively a politician in a government for years and they are also a cult leader, and an active cult leader that's supported by the Israeli government still right now when I'm doing this video, which is just the insanity of who the Israeli government are. Anyway, when I did my previous video, guys, about Judaism and cults, and I mentioned Lehava, I actually mentioned the case of I think it was Muhammad, I think the guy was called a Maral, and the lady was Jewish and the guy was Palestinian, you know, Muslim Arab. Maral converted, or in brackets reverted, to Islam. They got married, they had a happy marriage. I think this was around 2014 as far as I can remember, and it ended up making national press because Lehava came to boycott the wedding, insulted guests, tried to attack them, and Lehava, when they were present at the wedding, like outside the venue, there was 200 of them. Now, when I did my previous video, guys, I thought there was several hundred members of Lehava. I didn't actually even 2 months ago realize the volume and amplitude of Lehava members, essentially. And what I discovered recently is there are over 10,000 members of Lehava. Imagine a present day active cult that you see on the news that's supported by a politician, and the politician is one of the leaders of the cult, and they have currently over 10,000 members, and these people are actively trying to separate Jews from Muslims. They don't want a 2-state solution, they don't want interfaith marriages, like, and they don't want Christians as well in Israel. Like, this is who Lehava are. I'm going to mention a few things, guys, that Lehava have done in recent years. And I'm telling you, if these things happened in any other country, especially the UK, with these types of things, these members would have been imprisoned by now. Like this, they would have been immediately arrested, actually, and imprisoned. This would have been so serious, and the cult would have been shut down. It couldn't continue. But this is Israel we're talking about. So one of the things I wanted to mention is in regards to model Bar Raffaeli. You guys might remember that she was really big, I believe, in the early 2000s, as far as I can remember. And she was dating and got married to Leonardo DiCaprio. Everyone knows who Leonardo DiCaprio is, right? I've never been a big fan of his, but obviously everyone knows who he is, like Titanic, Wolf of Wall Street, etc., right? So anyway, they dated, they got married, and Lehava had the audacity to send an email or letter to Bar Raffaeli to tell her she shouldn't be with Leonardo DiCaprio because a Jewish woman should not be with a Roman Catholic man. Not that it's Lehava's business. Imagine these people are sending letters to high level celebrities to tell them that they can't date or have a marriage because Bar Raffaele is Jewish. Like, can you actually imagine this shit, guys? Now, there was also a group of rabbis that are part or involved in Lehava. And honestly, guys, in my brain, I'm like, how can rabbis involve themselves in an actual cult? Like, do you know, like, honestly, guys, it's beyond me. If you've done your training under a rabbi, which is a good 5 to 6 years training or more, just to be very clear, yeah, would you try to jeopardize your career as a rabbi by getting involved in a cult? But because there is the protection of the Israeli government and Benjamin Netanyahu, once again, you know, people just do what they want and believe that that is their vocation as a Jew, to destroy people's lives who are not Jewish, essentially, right? So anyway, there was 5 rabbis, I believe, or a number of rabbis that started sending emails or started emailing Jewish women to tell them that they must not work with people who are not Jewish, they must not date people who are not Jewish, and they must not do their national service with people who are not Jewish, yeah. And they literally sent all these emails and letters out to women in Israel to tell them this. Now, you know, this is absolute nonsense, guys. Again, this is something that you cannot even imagine in any other country. But imagine someone telling you that you are not allowed, no, it doesn't matter what your job is, you could be a doctor, lawyer, a dentist, a cleaner, a school teacher, you're not allowed to work with anyone who's not Jewish now. Like, it's just crazy. This letter was actually published, the one that the rabbi sent to these women, like the female population basically of Israel, and this letter was actually published in a newspaper, I believe it was the Haaretz newspaper in Israel. It's still a very active newspaper, and the Haaretz newspaper is a really good newspaper. I often see I think it's like journalists and editors and people like that from there currently, guys, on the news, you know, in the UK here, commenting on the war in Gaza and what the government, the Israeli government are doing, etc., and that it's atrocious, etc. And Haaretz are like a very, very outspoken newspaper, like they're never in agreement with the government, essentially. So what they did is they published this letter that these Lehava rabbis had sent to women to tell them that they, you know, they can't work with people who are not Jewish, can't date people who are not Jewish, and all this crap, right? And then when they published this, 44% of the Israeli Jewish population came back and said that they were actually in agreement with this letter that the rabbis had sent out. So imagine 44% of the Israeli Jewish population agreed that women should not work with Jews, that women should not work with non-Jews, that women should not date not people who weren't Jewish, and that women should not do their national service with people who are not Jewish. Like, it's absolutely stupid. In regards to celebrities, and I'm going to mention someone now again who is extremely well known and who owns several social media platforms. I think at the time that Lehava tried to do this to him, he only had one social media platform, and now he has several, I believe, which are Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp. I don't know if he has others, and that is Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg is so well known, right? So anyway, in 2013, Mark Zuckerberg, he got married to his wife, and I believe she was of Asian descent, maybe Chinese or Japanese. So she wasn't Jewish, yeah? Now, Mark Zuckerberg, I don't think he's like, I don't know if he's an observant Jew, but I don't think he's Orthodox or anything like that. So he's quite liberal, I believe, yeah? So he got married to his wife, you know, whatever. And Lehava then had the audacity to contact him to tell him that he shouldn't marry his wife because she's not Jewish. Bearing in mind that Mark Zuckerberg, guys, is someone who's got quite a lot of weight in the media, etc., etc. But Lehava don't care. They don't care whether you have millions or billions of pounds. They don't care if you're someone on the street or you're someone who owns 50,000 properties. For them, if you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing as a Jew, that's not good enough for them, basically. And they feel that they are within their rights to tell you that what you're doing is not good enough. And the way they do it, the way I'm wording this in the video, guys, is in a very polite manner. But the way they try to enforce it and the way if you see videos of them and the way they scream and abuse people, is actually very, very shocking, if I'm honest with you. Lehava actually started a Facebook page, guys, in 2013, and it was to track like mixed couples that were Jewish Arabs, so like women that were Jewish dating Arab guys. So they wanted to be able to track them on Facebook, so they set up this Facebook like group page thing, right? Now obviously I've just told you guys, and you guys know this anyway, that the founder is Mark Zuckerberg, who they've already pissed off in the year of 2013, and then they still went and set up a Facebook page to track interracial Jewish Muslim couples, right? Luckily it was shut down in 2014. Probably Mark Zuckerberg was watching them and shut it down. It was probably him who shut it down himself, yeah, because after all the shit they did to him, he's probably like watching whatever they were doing online, if I'm honest. So that was quite an interesting coincidence. And then I forgot to mention, guys, I hadn't mentioned yet, but you probably understood this, that they're anti-LGBTQ, etc, etc. So essentially these are people that they only want Jews in Israel. They don't want a two-state solution. So essentially they believe that, you know, Palestine is not Palestine, like it's just part of Israel basically. The West Bank is also not Palestine, that is just part of Israel. There shouldn't be any Palestinians, there shouldn't be any Christians, because obviously they're anti-Christian, because their founders are Ben-Gvir and Itamar Ben-Gvir, who hate Christians as well. And quite honestly, guys, I feel like these people they hate everyone actually who is not Jewish. And one thing that really sort of irritated me a lot, like it really hit me, I can't say it hit me hard, it really started to aggravate me, is the fact that they are trying to stop people like me being created. Now, I don't mean like content creators. When I say people like me, I mean Jews like me who have parents that might be of different religions or different ethnicities, and they then go on to have children like me. For example, my father is Chinese Jamaican, my mother is English Israeli. My father was actually a Christian, and my mother was non-religious atheist, but obviously I'm Jewish through the bloodline. So this is the nightmare of Lehava, is to have interracial couples where the mother's Jewish, the father is Muslim, Christian or whatever. They hate that, and they then have children because they don't want people like me to exist, essentially, which, you know, is very, very shocking in the day and age that we actually live in, and the modernization that we live in today. Now, there are times where Lehava do get arrested because they are so extreme, and they're people that will scream and they'll get arrested and be released again, because Israeli government, you know, they just really allow Lehava, out of all, I want to say literally out of all Jewish cults, Lehava is the one that are able to get away with the most shit. And I honestly feel like, guys, one, it's because Lehava as a cult, they're not doing anything incestuous in regards to intimate relations with people. When you look at their backgrounds, you know, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Ben-Gvir, they have got some criminality background there, but then Itamar Ben-Gvir is also an Israeli lawyer, so defense attorney situation, so they can sort of get out of really complex legal situations as well. And you know, there is, I mean, Itamar Ben-Gvir is currently the Ministry of Defense to Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel as we speak. So you've got a cult that is able to try to exert and impose their ideologies on people, which is overseen by the Ministry of Defense official for Israel, essentially. And that Ministry of Defense person is leading a cult and also influencing Benjamin Netanyahu to lead a war on Gaza at the same time, guys. And this is why Lehava is able to subsist to this day, because, you know, Benjamin Netanyahu thinks Lehava is amazing. Clearly, I mean, he was, you know, providing funding to Lehava from 2005 to Hemla, not Lehava, sorry, to Hemla, which Itamar Ben-Gvir was overseeing anyway, which was like another kind of movement against Arabs in Israel, now Lehava is not funded by the government, but I mean, one of the founders of Lehava is involved in Knesset, which is part of the parliament in Israel, essentially. I also find it very interesting, guys, and the reason why I mentioned earlier that Itamar Ben-Gvir's ethnicity is Iraqi Kurdish is because people may know that the Kurdish people as a population have been persecuted on and off for years, whether they're Jewish or another religion. They have been persecuted on and off over the years. So as a population, they have an understanding of what persecution is. So when I see Itamar Ben-Gvir and his parents who have come from Iraq and that are of Kurdish descent and have come to Israel, you would think that his parents would enforce in him to have respect for people coming from other countries who have other ethnicities and other religions. And instead we have a complete reversal of the situation where he has come, or his parents have come from another country to Israel, which is the salvation country and land for them, and he now thinks he can just go and persecute other people, evict them from their land, take over their property, etc., etc. And the fact that he's an Israeli lawyer, part of the parliament, had a murderer's portrait above, his mantelpiece in his living room. I mean, it is just unbelievable, if I'm honest with you. Like, there's all different cults, guys, and each cult in itself is disgusting and dehumanizes people and commits criminal acts and disgusting acts, yeah? But as I said, I have never seen currently that there is a political leader that's active currently leading a war as we speak. And also, let's remember that the US back Israel in the war against Hamas and Gaza, but the part of the Israeli government are leading a cult, an active cult as we speak. And as far as I'm aware, Lehava has never really undergone any criminal investigations because their leaders are politicians leading the Israeli government, which is just complete insanity. For those of you that have been intermittently or constantly following the war on Gaza, guys, and what the Israeli government is doing, I would like to know, what is your opinion, if you didn't know before this video, that the Ministry of Defense, who's advising Benjamin Netanyahu, is also a cult leader and an active cult leader right now. And if you thought that the situation was bad in Gaza and you didn't know this information before, how do you think the situation is going to get progressively? Already it's absolutely appalling. But I mean, a cult leader that's been able to assist in waging a war for what, 4 or 5 months now? There can never be any good outcome. And I think this is also why there's no ceasefire. You have someone who thinks that as a lawyer you can just pull out a gun on someone and you can take someone's house and just like get rid of them, whereas under any other international law you can't commit these criminal offences. You have a lawyer committing criminal offences, guys, essentially, like, it, honestly. But yeah, this is essentially the situation that is happening in Israel right now. Lehava are still extremely active, and I think, yeah, out of all the cults I mentioned in my previous video, this is the only one that has never really undergone any investigation, yet they're linked to criminal acts. You recall, guys, at the beginning of the video I mentioned the Zionist sort of nationalist party catch that Bentzi Gopstein was involved in, and obviously Itamar Ben-Gvir was kind of, interested in as well. And the founder of the catch, Zionist movement, I mentioned before that he was murdered, and Bentzi Gopstein was kind of, I believe, almost linked to that murder as well. So these people, guys, have a kind of criminal background, but they are not investigated for it, which is very shocking. Like, there's different criminal activities that a cult can do, but when there are murders that have gone on within these organizations, you would think that that would be the end of the cult, that it will get shut down, but it doesn't, because these people are politicians and have this extreme power, and we have one right now that is in power and sits in a seat which is very close to the Prime Minister of the country, which is, you know, something that you could just not imagine in the UK or elsewhere, for example. Anyway, guys, I hope you found this video interesting, insightful, learned a bit more about who Lehava are, those that wanted to know more information, and also that it gave you potentially an insight as to the link between a cult and the Israeli government, and why the war on Gaza is at the level it's at currently as well, because of who is assisting in leading this war, essentially. You're welcome to leave any comments down below. If you've got suggestions for any future videos, guys, leave them down below. I haven't decided yet. It's like a 50-50 ratio with me. If I'm going to do more videos about the other cults I briefly mentioned before and do more extensive videos on them, if this is something that you guys would like and you want me to discuss other Jewish cults or ones I briefly mentioned, but you want me to do videos which are a lot more detailed like this on them, please do let me know, because it's something that I'm considering doing, because again, there isn't much information on Jewish cults. So if you would like me to do that, or there's other types of videos or other types of videos to do with Judaism itself, please do let me know down below, and I'll be more than happy to take on board those suggestions. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys, and I will see you very, very soon, of course, for another one.